what you want, when you want it, where you want it. This is The Mesh.
Footcandle Films. Film news and reviews from two guys who really like movies.
This episode is brought to you by the Footcandle Film Society. For a schedule of upcoming screenings and membership information, visit the Society's website at www.footcandle.org.
Hello and welcome to Footcandle Films here on themesh.tv. My name is Alan. I am co-director and co-founder of the Footcandle Film Society and the Footcandle Film Festival. And with me, as always, my co-host and co-founder and co-director.
A lot of co's going on.
A lot of co's. My overall co, Chris Fry. How you doing, Chris?
Doing good. Interesting films we have to talk about today. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, so that's you're listening to Footcandle Films. Obviously, we're going to be talking about movies and films. So we actually have two reviews coming up on the show that we're going to get into. First up will be the latest film from Greek director, Chris, help me with the name?
Yorgos Lanthimos.
Yorgos Lanthimos. I always get tripped up on that. But it is The Favorite, starring Emma Stone, Rachel Weisz, and Olivia Colman. Then we'll be moving on to a review of the latest Netflix sensation, Sandra Bullock's Bird Box. Then after those two reviews, we will follow up with some movie news items and just some discussion topics about upcoming projects or interesting things in the film community, followed by and concluding with our recommendations for the episode. That's where Chris and I comb through all the films we've seen recently or got back in touch with recently and have decided to pass along to you, our audience, one film from each of us that we think might be worth checking out or revisiting if you have the chance. So, Chris, are we ready to get started?
Yes, let's do it.
All right. So moving on to our first review, the latest from Greek director of The Lobster and Dogtooth and several other films, Yorgos Lanthimos. It is The Favorite.
The Queen is an extraordinary person.
They were all staring, weren't they? I can tell even if I can't see, and I heard the word fat, and ugly.
No one but me would dare, and I did not. She's been stalked by tragedy.
Everyone leaves me. Dies.
Chris, in The Favorite, the latest from director Yorgos Lanthimos, we have the story of taking place of a very frail Queen Anne back in 18th century England. She's occupying the throne, and her very close friend and kind of someone who helps her with her governmental duties, Lady Sarah, governing the country in her stead while she's kind of going through some of these more health-related issues and maybe some mental issues as well. But then a new servant, Abigail, arrives on the scene and becomes charming to Queen Anne, and they start to have a little bit of a friendship that interferes a little bit with the relationship with Sarah. And what follows is a film where we have the three women kind of playing off each other in the roles that they have with one another, which leads to the title, The Favorite, meaning there's a little bit of a competition for who might be the favorite of Queen Anne. Chris, we've talked about Lanthimos films, a couple of them before, most notably The Lobster. Now, I never saw his last film, The Killing of a Sacred Deer. You did.
I did.
But we both saw The Lobster. It was highly rated by both of us. We actually had it, I think, on our list of favorite films of the year. It came out a couple years ago. But here we are with The Favorite. It is a 2018 film. It was released in 2018. If it's got any award nominations, it'll be coming up in this Academy Award cycle. We just did our top 5 of 2018 at the last episode.
Correct.
This was one of the blind spots we had where we freely admitted we had not seen this film at the time of putting together those lists. So my question to you to start off our conversation.
Sure.
If you had a time machine and you could go back to that recording of our top 5 of the year after now having seen The Favorite, would your top 5 look any different or not? And if not, tell me why not.
I think it would look different. I'm not sure. I've only gotten to see this film, unfortunately, once. But it would definitely figure into my top 5. So that obviously means my existing top 5 would have to move.
So you would retroactively go back and find a place for The Favorite in your top 5 of 2018.
Yeah, and probably, I mean, unfortunately, to solidify which film gets booted down to the 6 through 10, I'd probably have to watch it again just to kind of solidify my feelings about it. But the film, for me, this is a rare instance where all the buzz surrounding a film, by the time I finally got to see it, it actually lived up to it.
Okay.
The performance is Olivia Colman at this point, as of us recording it. She has won a Golden Globe for her performance as Queen Anne.
She won it for Best Actress in a Comedy or Musical.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the category may be a little suspect, but the award is not to me. She very much deserved it. She was really good. And it's something to where, acting in general good, but then just what she was able to do with her face, mannerisms, her walking, because apparently Queen Anne had bunions and or gout and or who knows what else going on. And yeah, she was doing a lot of acting. And so I feel like, the award was justified. Other people that kind of helped her out in the acting category, Emma Stone, Rachel Weisz, both really good. I would hate to have to be on the committee, the Oscar committee that says, okay, supporting actresses, who we got here? Okay, well, we don't want two people from The Favorite. Which one's going to go? That would be tough. And I mean, some people have made the argument, I think you made it last night when we watched the film with our film society, you kind of think, in a way, all three of these are leading because they all share a lot of screen time. They all carry a lot of the weight of the movie as far as, plot and everything. So how do you decide who's lead and who's, supporting? Yeah, I'm glad that's not my job.
Yeah.
But they all did a really good job. And some people that I feel like haven't gotten a little bit of notice, I mean, I've heard a little bit of buzz, but I thought they also did a good job in their roles. Nicholas Hoult, who the only thing I really know him from is Mad Max Fury Road. But he does a good job playing Harley, who's this political dude.
He's the head of a political party, one of the sparring political parties in England. A little more on the flamboyant side and manners of dress,
and
but
the makeup and the costume.
He was enjoying this part. I think Nicholas Hoult was. I loved every moment he was on the screen because I thought his part was just really entertaining.
Oh, absolutely.
And he was having a great time doing it.
And so, I know the name, I know his face. I've probably seen him in other things, but the thing that most comes to mind is Mad Max Fury Road. So to see him in something like this, which is very stylized, but I mean, you couldn't be more completely opposite than Mad Max than to have a period piece.
Yep.
So that was fun.
Do you know that Nicholas Hoult? Just a little side note on Nicholas Hoult. He was the one who played the young boy in the film About a Boy with Hugh Grant many, many years ago.
Wow.
That was him.
And I liked that movie.
Yeah.
I would have never put that together.
Yep.
I'll have to go back and watch that again, actually, because that's kind of I don't think that's ever come up in one of our recommendations.
No.
But
it's a good movie.
It is a good movie.
And he was the boy. Now, since then, I think probably the biggest role he's had, which I can understand not remembering it, he plays Beast in the latest X-Men movies. That's the one who turns into the blue furry guy. That's him as well. So just so you know, there's a little connection there from that. But anyway, that's what he's been busy doing. But yes, back to your review.
So also, the only thing I know this guy from is Sherlock. Mark Gatiss, he plays Lord Marlborough in the movie, who is the husband to Rachel Weisz's person. And I guess he's just doing a very stereotypical British aristocrat type guy.
Yeah.
But man, does he do it so well. He's
good.
kind
He
of
was
playing
good.
Mycroft, which is the character he plays in Sherlock Holmes. He's kind of doing that here. In a period. He's a period piece Mycroft or something. I don't know. I just thought he was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed seeing him do that.
Mm-hmm.
Thought he was awesome. Before I get into a lot of details, Alan, what's your overall? I'll throw the question back to you. Would you rearrange your top 5 from our previous show?
Yeah, I would. Actually, it would be number 3 for me. I've already kind of figured out. I've already figured out. It would be my number 3 film.
Okay.
That does mean, unfortunately, I think I'm bumping out Won't You Be My Neighbor and Mary Poppins Returns from that 5 slot.
Okay.
Going down a peg, but I still think, I've got Stars Born and American Animal still above The Favorite. But The Favorite's a good, firm number 3 in my book right now. I really had a great time with this film. I thought it was outrageous. I thought it was very, very funny and biting. I thought the acting was wonderful by all 3 of the female leads. The direction, we'll talk about some of the more interesting stylistic choices of the film in a moment, but it was just a pleasure to watch, even in the moments that were somewhat disturbing, or some of the moments are maybe a little more where you wove in some real drama into it, it was still a joy to watch. I think just from the way they framed the shots, the way they used the set around them, the actual palaces they shot in.
Right.
Scenes were always, I mean, just because we are shooting in manners that in palaces where there's typically a lot of ornate detail and everything, they just soaked all that in. Every frame just seemed to have so much detail going on. It was just really fun to watch. But I think probably my favorite takeaway is just some of the real biting humor and just some of the real, it was really funny, but also funny in a very dangerous way.
Sure.
So it was a joy it was an evil amount of fun to have in a film. And I really had a good time with it. So
something going into the film, I also thought there were a lot of, funny parts. Something going into the film I was a little worried about was knowing director Yorgos Lanthimos and basing a lot of it off The Lobster. His films, but also Dogtooth and Sacred Deer, his films tend to be dark.
yeah.
And, that's just kind of the way, he class, society, and like how people function in certain social structures. And that's kind of a big deal of his. And I was worried that the humor, I wouldn't be able to laugh at all because it would be so dark and so kind of sinister and undercurrent that it would kind of take the fun out of the film for me. And I knew I would probably like it because of his track record, but I was a little concerned. It wasn't a problem at all with me because... And I think it's because each of the characters and we can talk about the degrees to which we feel sorry for them or to which we think they're manipulating, Queen Anne, Sarah, and Abigail, they all have points where you can sympathize with them. But they also, most of them, I would say, have points where you're like, no, you are being very manipulative. You are taking advantage of others. You're a terrible person.
Yep.
Or I am lodging this complaint, I'm just making this judgment, quick snap judgment. Nope, you're terrible. There's no, salvation for you. You're terrible. But I think that works to the script, which Lanthimos did not write, but Deborah Davis and
this is actually one of the, I think this may be the first film Lanthimos has directed that he didn't write.
He did not write.
Yeah,
Okay,
I believe I read that somewhere. So that's kind of interesting to see him adapting somebody else's work and this still had a very much of a Lanthimos feel to it. There was no doubt about it.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised to learn that he didn't write it because it just seems like that's kind of his mode of operating. But I did appreciate the humor. I did like it. I think that what would you say as far as how you think the script, the acting, the director, and how they manage these characters so that I feel like for the most part you could find sympathy but then also kind of discount them. I think the one let's fun exercise. Sympathy rating.
Yeah.
Who do you feel the most, do you feel like is most the victim? And then who do you think is just like the person who you're just like, no, they should be cast
I
out?
feel like Queen Anne was the most sympathetic character. Okay. I don't ever feel like she was really ever portrayed as manipulative or as bad intentions at all.
Okay.
She was just in a very, very tough spot. She's gone through so much trauma in her life. And that's hit on one of my favorite scenes, which is probably the one scene in the film that's probably the most tender and has no outrageousness to it. There was no biting to it. It was just true, pure human emotion, was her introducing Abigail to her collection of rabbits and explaining the symbolism of the rabbits.
It's a great scene.
It's a wonderful scene, and just both of them played off so well. And it's like, for a moment, we've been laughing, we've been kind of cringing. It's like all this, and then they get to this moment, and you're just like, some of this just drops, and you're just like, wow, okay, Queen Anne is a human being, and she's been kind of played for laughs up to this point. Because she's kind of fumbling and, a little over dramatic about some things and all. But then you realize what she's gone through and what the rabbits symbolize. And you're like, oh, okay, I get it now. And it changes your whole perspective of her for me, almost for the entire rest of the movie. So I love that scene. But I definitely think on the sympathy meter, she's the top for me. The other two, there are moments, yes, I have some level of sympathy for them, but I definitely don't end the film with any sense of sympathy for either of them. I think they both kind of had their own doing. One of the two, I think, comes out better at the end than the other. And I think that's part of the plot of the story, is to show that what one may be trying to strive for is maybe not what they ultimately really need. there's a few lessons to be learned along the way. I thought,
but not the type of thing you wouldn't say this movie's an after-school special.
No, definitely not. And
you don't need younger children watching it.
You're right in that you don't really. The film does a great job of not making you love or absolutely hate either of the two women in question. I think it plays with your emotions back and forth quite a bit. Even Abigail, who this is the best thing I think I've seen Emma Stone do, just because I really feel like she's playing an interesting role and just having fun doing it, just like many of the characters are. But even her role, which from almost
she's the least likable.
She is.
She's the most despicable.
And you almost dislike her from the very first scene you see her in, because you can almost tell that she's planning something from very, very early on. But she still even has some moments where you catch her with a facial expression, or you catch her after she's just said something to someone and she's turned and walked away, and you get a sense of, ooh, she is just kind of figuring this out as she goes. And ooh, I don't know if she may think she's getting herself into a deep hole here. So you start to have a little sympathy at times, but then by the very next scene, she's completely whisked that away and done something to make you lose that sympathy. So it was just 3 really fun parts to play. I'm sure the actresses all had a great time with it. I've seen them in award shows, the 3 of them kind of palling around and kind of having fun with each other. Really? And it makes me think, I think they kind of had a good time putting this, performing in this film. And like I said, it shows. It's infectious to watch all 3 of them on screen, I feel like, after watching this film.
You touched on something which I definitely want to touch on, the cinematography and kind of the look of the film and how that added to the film's overall experience. For me, it definitely did, because the shots in this film, you do see a lot of palaces, a lot of interior courtrooms, a lot of luxury, basically, to kind of sum up. A lot of really fancy bedrooms, a lot of really fancy sets, but they're not sets. They're actually, places, real places, apparently, according to the credits. And I think if it had been filmed differently, it would have seemed like every other period piece, and it would have kind of gotten numb to it. Instead, there's been a lot of talk about this in reviews. The way it was shot, they use a lot of like fisheye lenses, so that things are just, sometimes they are very distorted. Other times they're just slightly, you can kind of tell something weird's going on with like the edges of the frame. And that to me just kind of heightened the experience and made it more interesting, and made a lot of times during the opening, they have this opening where they're showing a duck race, which we'll get to some animal comments here in a second, because it's kind of a theme with Lanthimos, but it just kind of heightened their grotesqueness of high society. Instead of, showing this and showing like, oh, look at the fancy, don't you envy these people? Don't you wish you were them with all their money and their power? Oh, these grand old days of the 18th century. But no, instead they just made it look really disgusting and they made the men look stupid with the big wigs, and he did some, in addition to the fisheye stuff, he did some kind of slow motion, and it just made it look real garish, and I thought that was a really interesting touch.
Absolutely. Well, and I think too, the fisheye lens being used so much, I think we had a great discussion during one of our screenings about how it almost gives you a sense of being a voyeur, almost like looking through a peephole in a door where the view on the other side is distorted and kind of that fisheye view. It's almost like we're peering into something. We're seeing a lot more behind the scenes than the public would normally see. Even in the sense of the palaces, you're right. All the shooting in the palaces is really great to see all the architecture and the design work around it. What I'm more fascinated are by, there's a tunnel almost leading between like the library sitting room and the queen's bedroom, that her aides would kind of shuttle her back and forth in the wheelchair. And it was like pitch dark, but just like candle lights lit along the, really kind of just a complete different view of what you see in palace life. And even in the bedroom, there's a door built into the wall where it's just the tapestry is there. You don't really see the door. The door's almost a hidden door. And I know I've seen these in a lot of recreations of actual palaces. These are actual things that were there, the doors. But the door leading to that tunnel, it's just like a secret door almost. And it becomes a pretty big part of the film. There's several dialogue scenes happening around that door.
Well, and the scenes of dialogue, or the scenes that happen in hallways that are not secret passageways and things that happen there, contrasted with things that happen in the secret passageways, or time they use the secret passageways and times they don't. And you could almost do a doctoral thesis on times the passageway were used and what that means, as opposed to things that happened out in public in other hallways.
Yep,
Like, I know
true.
there's a lot to chew on there.
A lot going on there. Yeah. You mentioned about animals, and, just like with the lobster, there's animals play a pretty critical role in this film. We have ducks making racing and kind of being representative of the male aristocrats and just kind of their foolishness, whimsies of racing ducks because that's what they want to do with their free time. You've got rabbits. As we mentioned, Queen Anne has quite a collection of rabbits that have a very stated symbolism you learn later in the film.
I like the fact that, at least in IMDb, one of the credits is for Horatio, and his thing is fastest duck in the city.
Fastest duck in the city, that's true.
I don't know. The credits for this film are kind of crazy and kind of hard to read.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they actually put that in the credits or not, but I sure hope they did. Because just having Horatio, fastest duck in the city, that's kind of awesome.
Birds play a big role because there's a lot of bird shooting going on in the film. And even lobsters kind of making a little cameo appearance at one point. Could be seen as a little wink to maybe his past film. But
sure.
So again, animals playing a critical role, just like they were in The Lobster. I do think you could look back, and we won't go into spoiler territory, but I do think each of those animals represents something, represents some aspect of this royal life. And, the ducks, I think you've alluded to, kind of this male folly. It's like, well, it's just kind of a ridiculous thing to think about racing, but yet, hey, we live in a palace and we can do whatever we want to do. And this is how we want to spend our time because we're rich and we're all these other things, real fanciful. So I love the use of animals. I thought it was great. And seems to be a theme he likes to carry through a lot of his films.
Yeah. And I'm curious. I feel like a lot of his themes could be reduced down to something as simple as the lobsters as used in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, let's use them as pets. Oh, and then whoever wins, we either do eat them or we don't eat them. I don't remember.
Well, it's like we're going to erase them and then we're going to eat them.
Both of them.
I think we're going to eat both of them.
Actually,
it doesn't matter.
That speaks even more to Lanthimos'
doesn't matter.
philosophy. We're going to have fun with them, but then we're just going to eat them anyway. So we'll treat them like pets for a second and kind of have fun, and then we'll eat them.
Yeah.
Because I think the themes of that kind of relate to themes in The Lobster, and it's like animals is something we'll have as pets. We treat nicely at some point, but then we can turn gruesome on them in a second. Just like I'm sure some of these ducks end up being eaten.
Sure.
You talked about the cruelty of the doves, I guess it's they're shooting.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no point other than just like, oh, it's fun and target practice. Oh, that's a lot of fun. I think that just says a lot. And I think he seems to be interested in kind of what that says about the humans, how they treat
the rabbits really seem to have the elevated status of animals, and there's a role they play.
Only for Queen Anne.
For one person, that's right. You're right. Not elevated for anybody else.
The person that we are most sympathetic with, I think. You and I are on the same page with that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I will say, yes, I think all the things you've commented on, I'm a big fan of. Some people will wrestle with the ending. And again, we won't go into any kind of details on it, but it does end in what I consider to be a little more of a Lanthimos style ending where it could be seen as a little unsatisfying because it doesn't really give you any resolution, anything, but yet I also think it didn't need to. I think it ended on probably the most serious note of a film, even though for a film we've been laughing with for most of the film as well. So I admire it for ending it the way it did, although I know it's going to probably rub some viewers the wrong way, but there's a lot you can read into the ending, which I think is worthy of discussion afterwards too. So.
Yeah, I felt like it was pretty, I guess, and maybe I'm judging it from a Lanthimos perspective. I felt like it was pretty cut and dry, pretty normal.
Yeah.
It was a very cinematic ending.
It was. And
I felt like...
And again, it amped up the drama a little bit, maybe to a higher level than we've seen most of the film. So it's kind of an interesting tonal note to end on, where you have a film that's so deliciously evil and biting humor and all, and then you end with something that becomes a little more poignant, a little more emotional, and that was interesting. But
I think, we'll just suffice it to say there's shots of rabbits, and I think what that's saying, and I think you can very easily draw a conclusion as far as what that's trying to say. So it was very cinematic, not a stated ending, but to me it really worked. And of course, I guess once people see this movie, they know the type of movies I like. They'll be like, oh yeah, that's a Chris Fry ending. So sure enough it was. I liked it.
It was good. I thought the score was really interesting.
Yeah.
Both beautiful at times and extremely jarring and nerve-wracking at times. But I think, like you even mentioned at our screening last night, that's it's more that to keep you on edge and to kind of poke you is what I think you described it as that the director seems to be intent on doing, even with down to the score. Use of audio cues. There's a lot of background audio at times that not always is obvious, but things are going on. Most notably for me, there was a scene where Abigail and the Queen kind of start to become friends for the first time, and they have a dance scene where the two of them are dancing together. But the whole time they're dancing, loud gunshots are going off in the background because somebody is shooting doves in the background, and it's very pronounced to get your attention that you know there are gunshots happening while this friendship has started to form, kind of hinting at the danger that's also along with that happening. Even, I don't know, did you pick up on the fact that during the opening Fox Searchlight fanfare, the Fox song, the da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da, was being produced by chickens?
I didn't realize it was I noticed.
Or ducks, maybe? I'm not sure.
Noises.
It was bird. If you listen carefully, that actual little fanfare is being sung by these animals chirping or squawking. Very, very light in the background. But, of course, part of the joy of me having seen it a second time now, I can see it a little bit clearly. Just the use of audio, even sometimes very slight. There's a scene where Lady Sarah is leaving the palace to go somewhere, and you actually hear some faint screams in the background, and it's just, I couldn't quite figure out what they were, but after seeing a second time, you realize it's doing a little foreshadowing of some stuff. It was just, the use of audio was really pretty amazing, I thought, throughout the film. So had a good time with that as well. Yeah,
there's just a lot. I think there's so much to talk about in this film. You could pick out so many different scenes to talk about, and that for me just strengthens it among the films that came out in 2018. So I'm not sure where it will be lodged.
Somewhere in your five,
but it'll be somewhere.
And I'm pretty clear with it being number 3 right now for me. I'm very, very happy with that choice. So that is The Favorite. We are both big fans, highly recommended. I will say, if you have seen any of Lanthimos' other films, this is probably the most accessible, meaning, it does have its unique style to it, absolutely. But as far as from a mainstream audience standpoint, I could see mainstream audiences getting a little bit more out of this film than maybe some of his other films.
Sure.
So I will say, I hate saying mainstream because it's definitely a unique enough piece of work. I don't consider it that. But for it to be quite as acclaimed as it is right now with, Academy Awards and Golden Globes and all, for it to get that kind of notice, it's obviously resonating with a much larger audience than he's ever had for his other films. So. All right, well, that is The Favorite. It is still playing in some select cities and smaller run, but it will be one we keep our eye on when the Academy Awards are nominated or nominations are listed here in the next coming weeks. But Chris and I are both big fans. Top 5 film for us for 2018, so we recommend, if you have a chance to see it, we would ask that you certainly do so. So, Chris, we're going to move on to our second review, which is the latest original film on Netflix, this one having generated, supposedly in the first weekend, 45 million users watching this film. This is the latest one starring Sandra Bullock. It is Bird Box.
What's going on?
People describe seeing an entity that takes on the form of your worst fears.
Oh my God.
What are you looking at? What did you see? What is wrong with you? Please stop it!
Listen to me. We are going on the trip now. It's going to be rough. If you hear something in the woods, you tell me. If you hear something in the water, you tell me. But under no circumstance are you allowed to take off your blindfold.
Do you hear that? The creatures.
Bird Box is the most recent release, although that's hard to say. Probably just while we were recording this, they've released 10 other things on Netflix that are newer than Bird Box. But as you mentioned, 45 million people in the first week supposedly watched this when it was released back in December, which is 1 in 3 Netflix users. So you consider all the people that have an account, 1 out of 3 people. I know with my family, all 4 of us sat there and watched it.
I had 2 in my house. So, you start to do the numbers. You could be looking at supposedly over 100 million people having watched this film in the first weekend.
It's pretty impressive.
Possibly, yes.
There are rumors that they're already talking about a sequel.
Oh, really? I'm shocked.
Why would they do that?
Yeah.
Alan, with other Netflix releases, there's Roma. We've talked about recently on the show, also Ballad of Buster Scruggs. We kind of batted around what we thought Netflix distribution of these films, benefits, pluses and minuses. And where do you think this falls as far as why it was to a Netflix movie Netflix was chosen as the distributor? Why did Netflix buy this movie? Why did they put it out? How do you think it fares with maybe their strategies for the other two films? And more importantly, does it figure into your top 5 of the year now that you've seen this and all the buzz and everything that was around it, which I don't think you can talk about this film without talking about Netflix had to issue a retraction or kind of a statement saying, please do not do the Bird Box challenge, or, please try to be smart and not go out and do stupid things with a blindfold. They actually released statements on this because apparently things were happening. I just saw something today when we were recording this about some person got in a car and supposedly drove with a blindfold and got in a wreck.
What people? They're the same people that were eating Tide Pods and doing other things there.
I guess so.
Well, okay. So you asked a lot of questions. Let me kind of pick off the easy ones first. Is it in my top 5? No. Did I like the film? And not particularly. I thought it was fine, which is kind of the curse of death when you talk about films. It wasn't bad to where I can laugh about it or joke about it, but it was not good either, where I have a burning desire to either see any of it again or really it missed the mark on a lot of fronts for me that I can specify in a moment. Why was it so successful? Well, I think it's a perfect storm of reasons. You had a movie a few months ago or last summer maybe that was A Quiet Place that did really good box office. I think it was rated PG-13, but it was still a movie theater film that people had to pay $7, $8, $10 to go see.
Right.
It did fairly well. It was kind of a high concept, very similar to this film where society is kind of broken down and there's been some sort of enigmatic force that's terrifying people and killing people.
Right.
And you don't really know quite what it is a lot of the time. In A Quiet Place, it's all you can't make a noise because if you make a noise, they'll hear you, they come kill you. In Bird Box, the whole plot is, well, if you see this thing, whatever it is.
Oh, we'll get to that.
If you see it, it will cause you to do some damage to yourself and others around you. So obviously the goal is you don't want to see anything when you're outside. So you have your blindfold on. So again, very similar conceit. I think the reason this film got such traction is A Quiet Place was a good movie. I liked it.
Yeah. We reviewed it on the show.
We did.
I think.
It was a good movie. But it cost $10 to go see it. Netflix, you pay $9.99 a month and you've got access to all these films. And hey, Sandra Bullock's in a brand new film. And it's kind of similar to A Quiet Place.
Oscar winner.
Oscar winner. It's similar to A Quiet Place and it's got a horror element to it, but it's also a mystery. What's going on? Who's doing this? It just had enough of those elements together. And I think it hit at the right time of the year, with it being wintertime and holiday season. Everybody's like, hey, that sounds good. Let's watch a movie.
Yeah, we don't have to get in the car and go out to the theater.
That's right.
We can just turn our TV on.
It checked the most number of boxes on the marketing demographic wheel. That is just, to me, it was a perfect storm. And everybody decided to go see this movie all at the same weekend. But again, getting back to a review of it, I thought it was lacking. I liked the premise. I like the conceit of it all. I love the kind of the idea of an unknown force that's causing people to act in disturbing ways and people having to figure out how to deal with society to work around that. All that I liked. I just felt the implementation of the film, the way they portrayed these things to us and the way we followed along was really disappointing. I thought Sandra Bullock was pretty good.
I thought
in
she
the
was
role.
pretty good.
I mean, given what she was given to work with, I actually liked the fact that the scenes you see her, the film is done in kind of a split time. We're seeing both the outbreak of this situation and then it's being juxtaposed with today, I guess, or present time, where the situation...
The river journey.
The river journey, which is, we take it to be like a while later, several years later.
5 years later?
5 years later than what we see earlier in the film.
Right.
But the whole film is flipping between these two time periods because we're learning both how the situation got to where we are and where we are now and the danger we have to face. I like the fact that in the 5 years later, she's portrayed as kind of a tough woman who's kind of brutal with her kids and all that, but she's having to do that out of necessity. Mm-hmm. You get it. I mean, you look at it and you're like, okay, yeah, they're not making her likable at all, but I understand why. She is all about survival. She is all about the safety of her family, even if it means that they hate her and don't like her and you cringe when you hear her talk to them, but it's all about safety. And I like that choice they made with her character.
I was surprised to learn that this film, the idea from it was actually adapted from a novel.
Yeah.
And I think in a novel, a lot of those ideas may work a lot better. You mentioned the creature that you don't see, and we'll address that here in a second.
Yeah.
But that was something that in a novel it kind of works because it's easier. I think with words it's easier to build suspense, but in a movie it just comes off as irritating sometimes if you never end up seeing the creature at all.
Yeah.
Although I kind of like some of that. Sometimes it's like that's not the point of the movie, is to provide this scary creature. It's supposed to be more psychological and more working on some. So, but we'll address that in a second. But that was one of the things I was, about this film that I kind of liked, but I was kind of surprised by that. It was based on a novel, and I would have thought some of the screenplay would have been better or would have been tighter. I will say the journey down the river, I kind of liked that framework. It was the flashback and kind of the explanation stuff. Despite having a lot of really good actors, they had John Malkovich, Sarah Paulson, Jackie Weaver, Trevante Rhodes, who had been in Moonlight. This is like another thing that he's in. He and Sandra Bullock are kind of some of the more key players in it. It was unfortunate that I felt like those flashback scenes were kind of cobbled together, and they didn't really, they weren't flowing very well.
I agree with you. I actually I thought the flashback, which is about half the film or a little more than half the film, was pretty bad. I mean, I thought, the pacing of it, the way it was written, I don't, and there's so many questions I don't understand. Plot machinations. I don't understand the rationale for characters doing the things they do in that first half. I actually appreciated more the present period of the film where they're on the river journey. I got it. That made a lot more sense to me. I understood what they were trying to do. So yeah, it was a little bit of a split film for me. I wish the flashback portions, which are the most enlightening to let us know how we got to where we are, were better written and better handled. Yeah. All right. You tell me when we're getting in the nitpicky criticisms, because I'm ready to go.
Nitpicky stuff can happen anytime. I'll just say that something that I learned about this film after the fact, because you and I had mentioned we were going to review this, and you kind of gave me your general impression, so I kind of knew where you fell.
Yeah.
Turns out the monster that we don't see, apparently, I had thought it was done on purpose. It was like a style thing, and they were trying to make it more psychological. Well, it turns out that apparently they did actually have a creature, and according to reports online, the first time Sandra Bullock saw it come on set, she laughed at it because it looked like a long, fat baby. That was sort of, and she just said that like she couldn't take it seriously, like was just laughing at it the whole time. So then they kind of made this decision, okay, we're going to keep it more cerebral. And just, so it was like a funny creature design, which I can say that's kind of the danger you run. If they were to show it and it was that bad, then that would have like taken this movie down another couple of pegs for me.
I'll tell you what, with the creature, okay, it did not bother me that we don't really see it.
Sure.
Because actually that kind of plays into the conceit of the film. The whole thing is that when you see this thing, it affects you in such a way, and it affects two different types of people different ways, which I also thought was probably something that I'm sure was better explained in the book. Not explained here at all.
Sometimes
and it just left it as
people commit suicide, and then others it just makes them go crazy.
And it kind of has to do with their mental ability and their mental health at the time, it seems like. But again, glossed over, not explored. And I don't need to have everything spelled out for me, but I need to have some belief that this wasn't just some convenient plot device you put in there to have some different drama take place. But not seeing the creature, I'm okay with. It's not understanding the slightest single thing about what this creature is or represents is what bothered me. We're told at one time that you see your greatest fear, maybe, and that's what causes that. But then I've also saw other characters throughout the film refer to it as they saw it and then they started almost smiling like they were entranced by it. I don't understand any of the machinations of what was going on with this creature.
Sure.
And again, I don't need it all spelled out to me. I just need some strand of something to grab a hold of to understand what we're facing here. Okay. And then there's the whole mechanics of, all right, so is this creature only outside? So
they only wear blindfolds to keep from seeing the creature when they go outside.
But of course, when we're treated to any kind of glimpse of where the creature may be, it's like swirling leaves and wind. Doors are opening, things are happening. Is this creature constantly just always trapped outside and can never come inside houses? And, it's little things like that, just kind of enough things to kind of make you question yourself during the whole film. And that should not be the way you watch a film like this. You shouldn't be saying,
you were distracted.
But what about,
the whole time.
Why is this and why is that? Why is it this group of people happened to all hole up in this house when this thing started breaking, all hell started breaking loose? They're totally comfortable getting into cars and going to grocery stores and raiding places to get stuff, but yet they all feel like they're confined to this house and they can't go anywhere else. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense to me either. It's like, you don't know each other. Why are you stuck here if you're fine going to grocery stores and other places?
Right.
But yeah, you feel like you're all like this almost like odd couple arrangement of people, these very demographically diverse characters all come together, and it just seemed very convenient and forced. So when a film has you asking enough of those questions throughout I was more concerned about those things than I was about the actual fear and story of where they're going. That to me was a bad recipe, and that where it just didn't work for me. So.
Well, I will say the director, Suzanne Bier, she has won an Oscar for In a Better World, which is a foreign film from a couple years back, I think 2016 maybe. I don't know. But anyways, so she is a capable director. She's gotten awards. I think it all comes down to the script or the screenplay that was generated from this novel. I'm sure maybe, like you said, the novel explains it better.
Or not even explaining it, but just gave you a little more something to work with around it to kind of understand what this situation was and what they're facing. Yeah.
And I think something that would be interesting to see, people, listeners, if you've read the book, maybe you can write in and tell us. But there was a thread online about how there was a theory that this film was about, it was kind of hinting at, and was about racism and about how people, which you mentioned, touching on how all these different people from all over the place and kind of thrown together in the house. This is the John Malkovich part with the flashback. And they were saying it's a whole thing about people not wanting to see racism. It's everywhere and it's rampant, but they put the blindfolds on to try to ignore it and to try to pretend it's not there. I think, and that's a very hackneyed, rushed way of trying to explain away what, I think that's an interesting idea. And if that was there in the novel, it definitely didn't come through.
No, yeah.
Definitely didn't come through.
I can see it being a great argument to make and theme in the book. But it showed no sign of that whatsoever in the movie. And I think that's really the problem. You have a book that I'm sure in the book it was probably a little more thought through. You had this kind of concept you're dealing with, not spoon feeding the audience or the reader on what's happening, but just enough to know, okay, is this affecting is it affecting the people's their own brains to cause them to see things or react a different way? Or is it truly the visionary that they're seeing something? Is there the theme of racism and blindfolding yourself to it? But it almost got all so watered down that the movie just seemed to be concerned with, we need to have people hurting themselves and doing it in dangerous situations and leave enough survivors to make an interesting plot going forward. We don't really care what causes the things to happen.
Right.
We just want these things to happen so we can get Sandra Bullock and these kids on the river. That's it. And that's what I felt like the whole time. I felt like it was just, how do we get Sandra Bullock and the kids to the river that we see at the end of the film?
So it could have just been called, instead of Bird Box, which is kind of, there is a reference to it in the film as far as like a bird box, but it could have just been called How to Get Sandra Bullock and the Kids on the River.
That's pretty much it. It's almost like every plot beat, I felt like, yep, we know that she's going to end up on the river with these two kids. So now the whole movie is just, how do we get her down to that spot? And that's, again, not the way a film like this should play out.
Gotcha.
So it's just,
I'll say,
it was disappointing, I will say, because it was a good opportunity to make a great thriller. And it had a couple moments I thought were pretty well done. A couple moments that were a little tense and a little frightening, but not enough of them. And again, my brain was not focused on the fear and the terror. It was focused on, why did they do this again? Or why is this happening again?
Sure.
And that's no way to enjoy a film. So.
I think wrapping it up for me, I think this film was helped by the fact it was distributed by Netflix. It was conveniently there over the holidays. The family was like, the kids are, they don't want to watch some, general family fare like, ooh, let's watch this thriller that just came out. And we're like, okay, fine. So we all sat down as a family and watched it. And for me, the film that I did not think of A Quiet Place. The one that I kept thinking of was M. Night Shyamalan's The Happening.
All right, this was better than The Happening.
That's all I could think of. It's like, better. Not that this film is great, but it's better than The Happening.
I'll tell you what, though. At least in The Happening. Okay, the problem with The Happening.
Now Alan is going to bat for The Happening.
At least in The Happening, there was some understanding of what exactly was going on. Some. It was far-fetched, but at least they're running from the wind and the wind. Okay, well, at least they explained the wind is carrying this kind of, whether it's pollen or something like that was getting into people's nervous systems and causing these breakdowns. Okay, far-fetched as all get out, but at least I got it. Okay, so when you see the wind blowing, that's bad. Get away from the wind.
Away from the wind.
All right. Now, every other aspect of the film was worse. Acting, the plotting, all that. So this was better on all fronts than The Happening, but at least The Happening gave us something to grab a hold of to know what was driving the plot along.
Fair enough.
This was one where I felt like they were making it up as they go, or they just forgot about it and said, we just need them to be blindfolded. There's something scary out there that causes them to be blindfolded. Let's see how much fun we can have putting them in situations where they're blindfolded and not able to see what's going on around them. And for me, I needed more than that to really appreciate this film.
Okay. Fair enough.
But you sound like you liked it maybe a little better than I did.
There again, maybe a little better. And I think the reasons why it was more the viewing experience as opposed to the actual movie itself.
All
so
right.
I maybe but yeah, I'm not.
You went into it almost like somebody would go into like a horror slasher film. And it's like, let's just go and have a fun time and just be scared and watch
My expectations couldn't have been lower.
Mine was, I was kind of looking for something a little more high-minded and it just didn't deliver. If I was looking at for just pure cinematic thrills, it delivered some of those, and there were some moments that were pretty good.
And I will say, I think it's pretty amazing, and I don't think there's any rationale for it. I think if Netflix had set out to release this and make it as meme-worthy, Jimmy Fallon's been doing Bird Box challenges. It is everywhere in the public consciousness on social media. I don't think they could do that intentionally. You couldn't buy the type of publicity that they've been getting for this movie. And the unfortunate thing is, kind of what we're saying is, the movie doesn't really hold up to the hype.
No.
So that's unfortunate. For me, I guess I liked it a little bit better just because it was like, it's a family thing. Let's just go and watch this semi-scary ridiculousness. So
yeah, that's fine. There again, it's not a horrible way to spend 2 hours of your life if you're already for free, basically, if you've already got Netflix. But disappointing still. I felt like it could have been a lot more. I guarantee if this film had been released in traditional theaters, it would have made less than A Quiet Place did. Mm-hmm. Even with Sandra Bullock in the lead, I just don't think it would have made tons of money.
Right.
So I think they made a very shrewd move releasing it the way they did and hyping it up like they did. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah. That kind of harkens back to what we were talking about, the release of Roma, why that was released that way. And, what maybe Netflix was trying to do, whereas this, why release it this way instead of putting it in theaters?
Well, they're finding films that they know would not pack in the audience at a movie theater. But if people are given a chance on a Friday night of something to watch that happens to be already on their TV, right, these are good options, for entertainment. So that I think they're making some good moves. My whole issue is just with the writing on this film, as opposed to the decision to release it on Netflix. I think was a really smart one. So,
got you.
All right, that is Bird Box. We don't have to say if it's playing near you or not, because if you are paying the $7.99 a month or $9.99, whatever it is for Netflix,
then it is playing.
You got it. It's playing near you. It's playing very near you. So, it's a mixed bag. I'm definitely more on the negative side with it. Chris seems to be a little more ambivalent to it. It's not a horrible way to spend 2 hours, but I just felt like it really missed the mark in a lot of especially in the writing side of things. So, All right, so that is Bird Box. We finished our reviews of The Favorite, both huge thumbs up for us. Bird Box, not so much. Now let's move on. We're going to go do some news and we're going to do recommendations. But first, we're going to take a quick break. I'm going to come back, a couple of news items, and then we will close out the show with our recommendations of the episode. Stay tuned. You're listening to Footcandle Films here on themesh.tv.
We'll get back to your show in a moment. Just a reminder, you're listening to The Mesh, an online media network of shows and programs ranging from business to arts, sports to entertainment, music to community. All programs are available on the website as well as through iTunes and YouTube. Find out more at themesh.tv and give us feedback on what you like. And now, as promised, back to your show.
Welcome back to Footcandle Films here on themesh.tv. This podcast is kind of a joint production of the Footcandle Film Society, which Chris and I are the founders and directors of, located in Western North Carolina, but also with themesh.tv. That is a podcast network located also here in Western North Carolina, where we have shows and episodes available to the general public. You can find all of the shows that we have on our network for free at themesh.tv. That's THEMESH.tv. You'll find all the shows that are ongoing, both older shows where episodes are archived, as well as current shows, and you can see latest episodes that we've put out on any of those programs. So these are podcasts. So you may ask, what's different about a podcast from listening to just an audio program or audio show on a website? Well, the idea of a podcast is that something you can subscribe to. So yes, you can listen to this episode. You can listen to it on the website, themesh.tv, but you can also subscribe to the show, and that ensures that every time we put out a new episode, you will have that new episode delivered to you through your podcast vehicle of choice, whether you're using Apple iTunes, you're using Google Play services. I think there's TuneIn Radio, there's Stitcher Radio. There's a lot of different services that play podcasts. You can find us on any of them, subscribe to them. And then whether you're listening to podcasts when you go to the gym, when you go driving somewhere, when you're walking, or even in the background while you're doing other things, you have them available and you don't have to go hunt down the new episodes on your own. So I do encourage you to go visit themesh.tv, look up some of the shows, and at the end of the show, we'll tell you how you can get a hold of us and communicate with us if you've got some questions or thoughts about the program that you'd like to share. All right, so Chris, let's jump into just a couple of news items for us. Okay. We always like to talk about either upcoming projects or things that we're hearing rumors about, maybe some films coming up in the coming months that are going to be worth checking out, directors working on new things. But I'm not 100% done with 2018 yet. Okay. I know we said last episode, it's done. We bid it farewell, but We're still hanging on just a little bit. We reviewed The Favorite, which was technically a 2018 film. But the service we use, Letterboxd, and that's Letterboxd. So it's the newfangled way of doing websites where you drop one of the vowels. It's Letterboxd without the third E. That's the service we use, Chris and I both use, as well as a lot of other movie reviewers and movie fans, to log the films that we see. So throughout the year, even Chris and I both alluded to it, that, hey, you can look on Letterboxd and see what we're watching. Well, Letterboxd does a nice little service at the end of the year and says, here's your year in review. This is all the stuff you've seen. These are your highest rated films, and a couple other stats for that.
Alan, how many films did you log?
I'm kind of embarrassed to say because I know it's a lot lower than you. It's a lot lower than you. Should I say it?
Sure.
98 films.
Okay. I wouldn't know that's reviewed or logged.
Logged.
Oh, wow.
I don't review films.
Okay. That's
on Letterboxd.
Yeah, you just
I have zero. Zero films reviewed. I star rate everything, but I don't write a review for anything. Yeah.
I have 260.
Oh, I know. You are way above me on the films. Way above me. Now, granted, you also screen a lot of films and kind of for film festivals and some other things. So you get exposed to a lot more films than I do. So that's that understanding. I'm always pathetically embarrassed by my number of films. I've yet to really go too high into the triple digits in a year. But that is one of my goals. You got to have goals.
Sure, absolutely.
My goal is to watch more movies. But there is one stat that they give us that I thought was really interesting, and I cannot wait to hear what it said for you, because it told us who our most watched actor was of 2018.
Yes.
Now, when I saw my actor listed in my email, I'm like, that can't be right. There's no way. But then I went and looked. I'm like, oh, he did have a small part in this film, and he was a cameo in this film. And like after a while, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I get it.
And I can't wait to hear who it is for you, because when you mentioned, you floated in our production meeting, you floated, hey, let's do this. And I was like, yeah, that's funny, because I can't wait for you to hear who my most watched actor is. And you're like, oh, well, I think it will be funny too. And I bet we have the same one. And I'm like, I don't know about that.
Well,
so who was, I want you to
Well, let me just tell you the 3 movies that this actor was in.
Okay.
Okay. And see if you can guess it.
Okay.
Here are the 3 movies. This actor was in A Star is Born.
Oh, excellent. It's not the same one.
Okay.
There's no way.
This actor was in Black Klansman. And this actor was in Mission Impossible Fallout. Who is it?
Wow. Black Klansman.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, okay. Yeah, I'm trying to think of the people that it has.
I'll give you a hint. In Black Klansman and in A Star is Born, the roles are very, very small. In Star is Born, it's basically a cameo. In Black Klansman, it's a very interesting opening to the film.
Oh, Alec Baldwin?
Yeah. Alec Baldwin is my most watched actor of 2018.
That is...
For 3 films. That's it.
Random.
In A Star is Born, he is on the Saturday Night Live recreation, and he introduces the Lady Gaga character. So he has 1 line. And then in Black Klansman, he is the one doing the opening scene, speaking to kind of in front of a projector slide. Very racist tirade. And then, of course, Mission Impossible Fallout. He actually plays a decent role in that film.
He's what you would expect
role,
to say.
Supporting actor in that film. So, yeah, my most watched actor is Alec Baldwin. So,
but by chance, who did they tell you who your most watched director was?
No.
No. Okay.
No. Did you get the most watched director?
I did.
Chris, how did you get that?
That actually made sense to me. But we'll get there. Well, I'll go ahead and tell you, because that's not the funny one.
Yeah.
So my most watched director was David Gordon Green. And the reason for this was, I know why. I was like, oh, yeah, it probably is. He came out with the new Halloween. Mm-hmm. And as a build-up, I started back in January of 2018. I knew that film was coming out. It was one of my most anticipated. So I tried to go through his filmography and kind of rate and think about his work. So I watched a lot of things for the first time. I watched The Sitter, which I would not recommend. I did not like that movie. I revisited Pineapple Express. I watched, I can't remember, but I watched a lot of some of his stuff for the first time. Mm-hmm. But so I think because I watched so many of his films building up to,
well, I'm wondering.
I rewatched Joe, the one that you and I saw at the film festival. So I think that's why, is because I definitely had one director that I watched.
I wonder if the reason you were given a most watched director is because you actually saw multiple films by the same director.
Right. Oh, yeah.
I don't think I did.
Well, that could
that may be why I didn't get a most watched, because
I've seen one film
by every director. So gotcha. I don't remember any that I would have logged multiple films by the same director last year.
Okay. So my most watched director was David Gordon Green.
All right. What about your actor, though?
For all the reasons I just listed. Okay. My most watched actor, and this is just divine justice for many reasons, and you're just going to get a lot of satisfaction out of this. My most watched actor of 2018, Orson Welles.
For 2 films?
No.
Oh, that's right. You watched a bunch of the films he was in.
I watched Touch of Evil. I watched The Stranger. I watched The Third Man. I watched Citizen Kane. I watched Other Side of the Wind.
Yeah.
And I watched They'll Love Me After I'm Dead. So I watched,
Wow, you did see a lot of Orson Welles films.
So I actually watched a lot of Orson Welles.
Well, that makes total sense.
Right. And when I saw that, I was like, oh, Alan's going to think that is hilarious.
Oh, it's awesome.
Because as you know, anybody who's ever listened to this podcast, Alan likes Citizen Kane.
I do.
I'm not the biggest fan. It was just really, and I do say, him being my most watched actor of the year, I do say that I do have more respect for him now. I still don't like Citizen Kane any more than I did before, but I have more respect for him as an actor. Although I don't really think he's a good actor, but as an artist and as somebody who was trying to achieve a lot of stuff, I admire his ambition and what all he tried to do. So.
See, I think you kind of skew your results because you did these whole anthology, like I want to watch marathons of these either actor or director, and by doing so, you basically built up your own most watched.
But I would have never anticipated Orson Welles.
Mine was a much more natural, these are just happen to be the films I'm reviewing or watching, and it just so happened Alec Baldwin was in 3 of them this year.
Gotcha.
That are films I caught up with. So, very interesting.
Yeah.
Now, it also shared us our highest rated, which shouldn't really come as any surprise because it's the films that we basically talked about in our top 5.
Well, and right.
Although mine had a spillover from 2017 because Mother, a film I really highly rated.
You and I split on that one, I think. Yeah.
2017. It was a 2017 film I didn't see till 2018. So it had American Animals, Won't You Be My Neighbor, and Mother as kind of the 3 highest rated logged in the year. Now, granted, I think the favorite would probably be up there in that 4.5 star range for me now, if I were to add it back in. So, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So thank you, Letterboxd. We appreciate the year in review. Thanks for watching us all this past year and monitoring our every move and letting us know in the case of Chris, how many films he spent time watching this year. Me, I feel woefully inadequate with the number of films I saw. So, yeah. All right, Chris. So you've got something to talk about, don't you?
Yeah, I got a kind of an update, and I was kind of surprised about how many big horror movies are coming out. You and I have reviewed a couple. You mentioned Hereditary. I think, was it in your top 5, or is it just out of your top 5? For the
just
year?
Out of my top 5. It was in my top 10. But
Hereditary was a big one from this past year. A year before that, we had things like Get Out. So it's... horror movies have kind of...
Even the David Gordon Green Halloween you mentioned.
Sure.
Yeah, it was last year.
There's been a little bit of a resurgence. It was also, has been popular.
That was last year.
So coming up in 2019, we have quite the slate that I'm already aware of, and I don't know a lot about horror movies, but I've been made aware of these and just share them. I think we might have mentioned Jordan Peele's Us.
We did. I mentioned that as one of those I'm really curious about for next year.
Right.
It's not my most highly anticipated, but it is one I'm probably the most curious about because was Get Out a fluke? Was it a one-time deal where he just kind of turned out some consider a horror classic in his first film? Or is it a streak he's going to continue? The trailer is definitely unnerving enough to think that there's something creative going on there.
Absolutely. So that's coming out March 19th. We had it already. We have the second part of Chapter 2, as they're calling it, which will be out September 6th.
Which I am looking forward to. And I'll tell you, because I generally liked the Chapter 1. It wasn't perfect, but I thought it was a pretty good telling. I thought it was too heavily reliant on CGI at times and some other things, but I thought overall it had some good moments to it.
I think you were higher on it than I was.
Yeah.
However, like you, I am looking forward. I'm interested in Chapter 2 because of the cast that they have doing the adults. James McAvoy, Jessica Chastain, Bill Hader. It's just... They've got a lot of good people there.
Well, and I'm hoping they're building. I actually think, how they present Chapter 2 could be really interesting. I always liked as a kid, the old It miniseries on TV. I liked the kids side better than the adult side. So I'm kind of hoping this maybe reverses it, where maybe they do a really great bang-up job with the adult side, because I always thought that was the lacking part of the films before. So we'll see.
While we're on Stephen King, we'll mention, why not mention the other project? Because he's a hot property right now, Alan.
Yes, he is.
He's a hot property. We've got...
This Mr. King, I hear he's going places.
He's a big guy. Pet Sematary. They're doing a reboot of that. There have already been previews out. Comes out April 5th. How are you feeling about the new Pet Sematary?
So, very similar to the way I feel about it, in that growing up, Pet Sematary and It were the two books that my parents had on the bookshelf that I was petrified of. Okay. I didn't read them.
Okay.
My parents told me kind of the gist of the books. Mm-hmm. So I was terribly excited when both of them were turned into films. You had the Tim Curry version of It, which was on TV, and it was fine. I'd like the first night, which was more focused on the kids, but when it got to the second night with the adults, I thought it really was kind of dumb. And critics say
the animatronic spider was that amazing.
Critics say it definitely did not hold a candle to the book.
Sure.
I like the fact that I think the one we saw this year of It was a little more faithful to the book than maybe that TV version was. So I'm kind of hoping the same thing with Pet Sematary. Okay. I think the movie had some scary moments, but overall I didn't feel like it had quite the level of horror and just dread that the book supposedly had. I'm hoping they go a little further with this one and make it really terrifying.
Well,
it looks like it from the trailer. So
the trailer looks interesting. You see that John Lithgow plays the role of kind of the older curmudgeon man. And
instead of Fred Gwynn, Miss Herman Munster in the first film. Yeah.
And stylistically in the trailer, they kind of have a You're Next vibe going on where they have, instead of adults wearing masks, it's kids wearing animal masks. And they kind of get the creep factor down.
Yeah.
And they're like playing this drum beat in the trailer. Will it amount to anything? I don't know. But well put together trailer. We'll have to wait and see.
Well, Jason Clarke's starring in it too. So they've got, a pretty good actor attached to it. And John, like you said, John Lithgow. I'm curious. I want to hear that it's really good and really creepy and really scary. If we're getting a little bit of a renaissance of Stephen King movies, kind of getting a chance to redo some of the ones that didn't work so well, can I offer up and say we need a redo of Cujo? I'd be happy with that. A little more in-depth Cujo version. I could see, they tried to do one of what was the Sissy Spacek movie? Oh, shoot.
Carrie?
Carrie. They did a remake of Carrie a few years ago that was supposedly not that great.
Right. The original, I've actually recommended on the show.
Oh, no. The original, that was one of the Stephen King movies that was really good in the original version. So that was fine. What else do we need? Do we need what's another film we need? Christine? Isn't that the one about the car?
Yes. That is
do a remake of that one. Yeah, let's do a renaissance of Stephen King movies and right the wrongs of the past history ones that were not so good.
Well, rounding out the Stephen King movies that I'm aware of that are coming out, tying into our earlier discussion about Bird Box, this will be coming straight to Netflix. Patrick Wilson is in it. And it's an adaptation of a short story that Stephen King did. It's called Into the Tall Grass. And the director is Vincenzo Natali, which you're saying, I don't know who that is. Well, actually, you've heard of this guy before. He did Splice, which I don't know if you and I reviewed, but we talked about.
Oh, yeah, I remember Splice.
Okay, so he did Splice. He's done kind of the early sci-fi genre horror movie called Cube. So he's done a couple of things. And this is going to be his next thing is he's doing this movie for Netflix adaptation. And actually, Netflix has had Gerald's Game and then they had 1922, which were both straight to Netflix films. So this is like, I guess, another in that series of Stephen King Netflix adaptations. Yeah. I'm curious just to see what they do with it.
Well, and you add to that whole mix too, like Hulu has had Castle Rock, the show that's been kind of inspired by Stephen King characters and work. I think they're working on a second season for that soon. So, yeah, Stephen King's definitely had a kind of a renaissance of in different media forms in the last year or two.
Talking about a reboot, Alan. Got another one coming up June 21st. Yeah. Aubrey Plaza. You excited about Aubrey Plaza?
No,
Parks
but go
and
ahead.
Rec?
But keep going.
I
think she's overplayed her role as the dour, slightly goth girl. I want to see her do something different. So maybe this is it.
Oh, I don't know. She is back in the reboot of the 1988 Murderous Doll classic Child's Play.
Is she really?
Yes.
She's going to be in the Child's Play remake.
She is.
Okay. No, I'm actually, you know what? If they're playing it ironically, if they're playing it for
knowing that she's involved.
Yeah, I think that's the direction they're taking, I think that works actually. So I'm okay with that.
Okay.
I'm all right with that.
Okay. Got 3 more here.
Sure.
The next film from director Ari Aster, he did Hereditary. Yes. It's called Midsummer, and it's out August 9th.
Okay.
And this one doesn't give a lot of description, but it's going to be another creepy cult type movie. And this one takes place in Sweden. So,
okay. Well, Hereditary, got to me. It was creepy. I think, like I said in the last show, I admired the fact that it didn't rely on jump scares. It was truly just building tension and things sometimes in the scene that you have to look twice to see if they're really there or not. I love that style of horror film more than the jump scare one. So count me in for wanting to see it, but man, it took me almost a year to get around to seeing Hereditary, or at least 6 months. I don't know how long it'll take me to see this next one if I hear this is as frightening for me as Hereditary was.
Okay. The next one is adapted from a book. And Alan, I know you say I don't read.
I don't read.
You know what? I bet there's a high chance that you have read this book or you might have had it read to you.
I don't know.
By a librarian. That's right. This is being turned into a horror movie. No. It's scary stories to tell in the dark. And they used to have copies of this. If it's the one I'm thinking of, that they are kind of like ghost stories, but they're kind of weird. And
Doesn't ring a bell.
No. Okay, see, I think I can actually and they're classic stories that Alvin Schwartz was the writer who did it. And they're like little short stories, and they're probably about 10 or 15. They had them in a really little book, and they would put it out at Halloween time in my middle school. I don't know.
Wow. No, I'm not.
Here's the thing.
I'm drawing a blank.
Guillermo del Toro is adapting these stories for the screen. They've got another guy directing it, but he's producing it.
Okay.
And the line is the classic Alvin Schwartz stories that have terrified generations are being adapted as a movie. So if it is the scary stories that tell in the dark with like the picture that I'm saying, like, I think that's amazing. And they are kind of creepy and done in kind of it might be kind of like a Twilight Zone movie. What would be interesting is that they actually make it kind of PG-13. So it is scary, but yet like,
not kiddie friendly.
Not like horror, like horror.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Guillermo del Toro's scary stories to tell.
Sure. Okay. That could be
Sounds
interesting.
like,
Could be. I don't have any connection to the source material. So
books. I was hoping that would be one book.
Books. Those are those things with
pages,
sheets of paper in the middle with words printed on them. Yeah, right. I gotcha. Okay.
Okay. Last film.
Yeah.
Robert Eggers, who did The Witch. He was the director of The Witch. He's got a new one coming out. Don't give a whole lot of detail. It's another period horror piece, and it's shot in black and white. Stars William Dafoe and Robert Pattinson, and it's just called The Lighthouse.
I thought I heard another project that this guy was attached to at one point, but I guess maybe that didn't go forward. Or
you're talking about Nosferatu?
Oh yeah, that was it.
He is still attached to it. I think this one is finished first. So yeah, I think that one has been bumped to 2020, and this is 2020.
That's another one. As far as I'm concerned, the two guys to follow right now for horror, one that did Hereditary, the one that did The Witch.
Okay.
To me, those are
Ari Aster and Robert Eggers.
Those are creepier films for me. Those are much more effective than mass murderers, jump scares, all that, blood and guts. I want creep and dread, and both of those had them in spades. So I'm really anxious to see how their next two films are with those two directors.
Okay, so that's the slate that I'm aware of.
Good. I'm on board. I'm ready. I say bring it on. I'm not a horror film guy. But if I know a horror film is well made and does something a little different or a little creative with its subject matter, I'm all for it, and I want to give it a shot. So good. All right. Well, that's some movie news for you. We got a lot of films coming up in the next year. Chris and I, at our last episode, in case you're curious, we did talk about a few films that we're highly anticipating for 2019. I mean, Chris, we mentioned all the sequels and big blockbuster franchise films, but you and I picked out 4 or 5 films kind of collectively that we do feel like are worth checking into and curious about for the rest of the year. So add some of those horror films to that list as well. And could have an interesting cinematic year. Could be a lot of fun. All right. Well, let's move on to the last section of our show. This is where Chris and I both recommend a film for you, something we think is worth checking out, whether it be a new film that's available online or it be a classic film that we think is worth revisiting. Chris, you've been doing a lot of the talking for us a little bit, so how about I'll go ahead and jump in with my recommendation, if that's okay.
Have at it.
I have talked on this show about my admiration or my love for films that have to do with comedians, like real life, documentaries about either comedy or the art of making comedy. We talked about the film, the documentary about the Dana Carvey show that I recommended probably about a year or so ago. So a documentary has come out that has been around for a little bit. I think it was out in theaters maybe back in the summertime or early fall, but I actually saw it on CNN, I believe. Again, CNN has been showing a lot of documentaries lately. And this film is about a comedian, Gilda Radner. So the film is Love, Gilda. And, I will turn on and watch these documentaries no matter what, even if they're not the best made documentary. I'm always fascinated by the subjects and I want to absorb the information. And this film is still fairly traditional in its approach. What I think set it apart is that, Gilda Radner, obviously Saturday Night Live, she gained a lot of fame through the show. Then she became kind of famous in her own right with a Broadway show and being in a few films. And then she became a partner in life with Gene Wilder. Then she did pass away from illness later on in life, and an illness she battled for quite a while. So I was just fascinated to watch the documentary anyway, to learn a little bit more of the background of her as a character. She's not someone I've ever really read up a lot on or really followed, because she was a little before my time. You know, I was a big Saturday Night Live guy back in the 80s and definitely in the 90s. She was there at the beginning in the late 70s and early 80s. But what I thought this documentary did really well is that it did weave in her diary. So she kept a diary through most of her life. So we actually would hear her. I know she wrote memoirs from it and published a book with her diary. It would weave in passages from her diary, both handwritten portions on the screen as well as her voiceover of some portions, I guess she did for her audiobooks and other things too. And so it was nice to kind of hear from the subject, right, as well as the people around her. So it wasn't just all of her friends and family talking about how great she was. You heard her in her own words where she had her moments of anxiety and her moments of depression and what she was really thinking in her life at the time. So it's just a nice other element to bring into the documentary to kind of set it a little apart from just your standard, let's just show clips and interviews about this person.
Right.
So I liked it. I thought it was a good film, good documentary. And the fact that, CNN was showing it pretty regularly. I know you can get it online right now in a lot of different places. I thought it was pretty well done. I may be a little biased only because I like Saturday Night Live as an institution.
Sure.
I will pretty much watch any documentary about any key performer from that show or any phase of that show. So that roped me in automatically.
So you're waiting for the Horatio Sands.
Well, maybe everybody from Saturday Night Live, or maybe a few I might skip. And plus, I'm also a big Gene Wilder fan. So, of course, knowing that he was going to play a big factor in her life, and I wanted to see how that dynamic worked. It was interesting for me, but I will say I thought it was a fairly well-made documentary that's worth checking out if you have any passing interest in her or the background of comedy, especially in the 70s and 80s. So love Gilda. I think you can find it just about anywhere online right now.
And you can maybe catch it on CNN still?
I'm sure. if you have a DVR or some sort of way to search and record it, you should be able to find it here I would imagine the next couple of weeks. So, yeah. What about you? What have you got to share with us?
Well, I'm recommending mine sheerly based off the title. It's not true, but actually a couple of reasons. We have been talking about Netflix a lot, and so my recommendation is on Netflix. It's a Netflix original. It's Black Mirror Bandersnatch.
Oh,
and
the Bandersnatch.
Bandersnatch. How can you not like the title of that? So it's, I guess, an overly long episode of Black Mirror, so they've kind of released it as a feature, as a film. It's 90 minutes depending on how you watch it, and this is where some of my recommendation comes in. It's basically an interactive film, kind of like if you remember back in the 80s or whatever, they had choose your own adventure books. That's basically what this is set after. It's kind of a choose your own adventure movie.
Okay.
Meaning at certain points, the movie is continuing to play. Like you still see the action on screen, but it kind of shrinks up a little bit and you see two options below the screen and you have a timer that's kind of going. So like the characters are continuing to act, everything's continuing to happen, and you have to make a choice before the timer runs out. I think if the timer runs out, I never let it run out, I imagine it would just kind of go to black and the movie would be over. So it's like it's kind of like a time bomb effect.
Yeah, okay.
So you're put with these choices, and sometimes you're like, what? And they don't even kind of make sense. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, and you just have to kind of choose them really quick. From a movie start, stop, like beginning, middle, end. Obviously, I can see people being frustrated by this because they think it's nothing more than a gimmick. To me, it was still satisfying within the construct of being a Black Mirror episode, which is making meta commentary about technology, pluses and minuses, how people become obsessed with it, the downsides of that. And then you're kind of becoming obsessed with it because you're like, wait, which choice do I make? And so it's like you are participating in being obsessive about technology. Very meta. I liked it. Typical Black Mirror fashion. It is very dark.
Sure. Yeah.
I actually tried on purpose when I was watching it, and I don't know how long
you tried to do like the good.
I tried to like make the rosiest ending possible, and it still was like really dark. No, whatever you do, it's going to end badly. It's going to end poorly. So, but I mean that's Black Mirror.
Sure.
So, but I still found it really enjoyable. One of the actors in it, let me try to figure out. Will Poulter. I kind of like some of the stuff that he's in. He's a recognizable face. He plays a game designer in this and does a really awesome job. So it's basically, the story is a young guy tries to become a game designer he wants to design a game based on this, basically a choose your own adventure story that he like grew up reading. And I think the book is called Bandersnatch, which is where the name comes from, that he tries to make the game after.
Okay.
And and it doesn't go well. So, but it's if you're up for experimentation, Netflix puts out a lot of movies. This is something, obviously they're like, let's try this.
Sure.
Interesting premise.
I love the concept. I actually think when I first heard about it announced, I thought that's going to be great.
Yeah.
Not that it's the first time it's ever done that. There's been other video media that have done that kind of, even you go back to video games, like a Dragon's Lair type of game where it's like choices and that controls the video you're watching. But this seems to be the most polished implementation I think I've seen, and highest budget version of it.
Oh, yeah. I think of Black Mirror episodes, granted, this runs to be like a 90-minute episode, and most are like 45 minutes or a little over an hour. I think this is one of the most expensive Black Mirror things that's ever been made, because they shot so much footage.
Well, as I heard, if you were to stitch all the footage together for all the different scenarios and endings, it's like over 3.5 hours or something like that. So I'm fascinated. I will just give one little gripe. I haven't watched it yet, but don't hype up and announce this really cool technology for a film that you can watch on Netflix, and Netflix is available on a lot of different devices. I use an Apple TV. Apple TV does not have the interactive function on it.
Really?
Actually, when you go on an Apple TV, and I think it's on a Chromecast as well, when you go on the Apple TV,
I watch this on my laptop.
You're fine. But if you were to watch on an Apple TV, which is where I watch all my movies, it actually plays a little 1-minute commercial, and a narrator voice comes up and says, "We're sorry, but your device is currently not equipped to handle the interactive features of this film. So you need to go watch it on your phone, your iPad, or your computer, or some other device." But the Apple TV was not set up to do the interactive function.
So does it just play? It won't play it at all.
No.
It won't even play a 90-minute.
It just plays that 1-minute little commercial and a apology. Here's what you need to do type of thing. And what's interesting is as soon as I played that, I'm like, oh, are you kidding me? I got an email from Netflix like that same moment that says, "Hi, we saw that you were trying to watch Black Mirror Bandersnatch, and we're sorry, but Apple TV, you can't watch it on there. So here's some other devices you could watch it on."
So you're irritated, but actually that's...
Well, I'm irritated because that's...
Customer
No, that's
forward.
fine,
Yeah.
but the more customer-friendly thing would be, we have a decent percentage of our users who are on Apple TVs. We should have figured out a way to make it work. I get it. It's probably a unique technology that maybe the framework didn't work for that device.
I wonder if it's any TV stream. Like, I wonder if like a Slingbox. I wonder if you can.
No. I read up online. It's truly the Apple TV and Chromecast. I think Roku is fine. I think Amazon Fire Stick is fine.
Interesting.
But it's just the Apple TV and the Chromecast were the two I heard it will not work on.
Interesting.
I was hoping it would be something they would release a patch or update to the Netflix app in the next few days, and they never did. And everything I read online seems to be they're saying, nope, that's it. We're not going to support it on those. So that's disappointing for me. I don't normally watch my movies on my laptop. I like having it on my TV and my sound system, and that's what I like. But that's fine. I will watch it on my laptop now, probably this weekend. You win, Netflix, fine. But I do want to see it. And
that's worth saying. If you like Black Mirror, if you don't like Black Mirror, don't bother.
No, I love Black Mirror episodes.
Yeah.
Have we ever talked about? I mean, I know it's not a movie, but
I don't know if you've maybe recommended.
I think I did recommend it in a way because the first episode of the latest season, the one where it's basically a replication of an old Star Trek.
Yes.
It was a pretty long episode, if I remember correctly. It's almost approaching that short film category, so I thought it was worth recommending. That particular episode was one of my favorites.
And the captain in that episode was in Game Night. Can't remember the actor's
it's
name.
Oh shoot!
If you said his name, I'd remember, but I can't remember.
He was in Game Night. He was in Black Mirror. Oh my gosh, what is his name? He was in The Master. He was in a bunch of other films. What is his name?
He plays the police officer in Game Night.
Are you looking it up?
I am. So just stall. Phil Allen.
So yeah, he's a really accomplished actor. I like a lot of things he's in. Game night, he had a great part as the police officer cop next door that was always disinvited.
Jesse Plemons.
Jesse Plemons. How could we forget
Jesse,
Mr.
we
Plemons?
forgot your name.
So Jesse Plemons was in that episode of Black Mirror that I thought was really good.
He's been in like the FX series of Fargo. He was in a little bit of Breaking Bad. Yeah. So
I remember him from Friday Night Lights.
Okay.
Was the show I know he was on that I first saw him in. So anyway, Black Mirror, yes, great show. Episodes are kind of hit or miss, but I do think that one, the one that he's in, first episode of this latest season, is one of my favorite episodes. It's just bizarre and twisted enough. And I love the faithful recreation they did of the old Star Trek environment and tropes. It was really fun. Anyway, got off track. Back on track here. Black Mirror, Bandersnatch is your recommendation.
Yes.
And then my recommendation was the film I Love Gilda. So both available online. One you need the Netflix subscription for, and you need something other than an Apple TV to watch it. And then Love Gilda is available on a lot of different outlets right now. What?
He's not bitter at all.
No, of course not. So that is our show for today. So the favorite, enthusiastic thumbs up from both Chris and I. Bird Box, passable grade, but me and probably a little less so, with some real concerns about that film. We talked about upcoming horror films. We talked about Letterboxd, most watched actors. And then we gave our recommendations here at the end of the show. We hope you've enjoyed listening. But Chris, some people may have questions. They may agree or disagree with our takes on some of the films, or just want to talk about any of the news items we shared. If so, how should they go about getting a hold of us?
Just send us an email at info@themesh.tv and just mention Footcandle Films in the subject line. That's probably the easiest way to get in touch with us. You can also, I do write reviews every once in a while on Letterboxd. We've talked about that a lot on the show. You can attach me a note on there to one of my reviews and I can try to respond. Alan is also on Letterboxd, but not quite as frequently doing reviews.
I don't do reviews on there. So just don't go expecting me to write anything because I typically don't. But I will say that I at least log all the movies I've seen and try to star rate them as soon as we've talked about them here on the show.
And also, as far as feedback, we also have a lot of our episodes up in Apple iTunes. I think they keep a rolling list of about 100. If you're in iTunes signing up or subscribing and you want to give us a rating, we always appreciate ratings because that helps us reach more listeners.
Yep. So we will be back with another episode in the next couple of weeks. And until then, thanks for listening. Please check us out online and give us any feedback you may have. And we'll look forward to talking to you at the next episode.
See you in the ticket line.
Special thanks to Carpal Tuller for the show theme music. For more about Carpal Tuller, visit www.carpaltuller.com. You've been listening to The Mesh, an online media network of shows and programs ranging from business to arts, sports to entertainment, music to community. All programs are available on the website as well as through iTunes and YouTube. Check us out online at themesh.tv. Discover other network shows and give us feedback on what you just heard.